The Jehovah's Witnesses have settled 9 lawsuits alleging church policies protected men who abused children for many years. In settling, the church did not acknowledge wrongdoing. Now, evidence has surfaced that leaders did know about some of the men, but apparently never informed authorities.
This is just the beginning, and Jehovah's Witnesses covered up child abuse for years.
His on-camera admissions and a settlement worth millions may have to be enough for his victims. The Jehovah's Witnesses never told police about Campos, who was a church elder. He's never been charged with a crime.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm really glad to see everybody here. Hi. Today's topic is actually going to be more sobering than the ones that I normally do. It's a topic that I felt that really needed to be discussed because it's a huge problem within the organization and it is affecting so many different people and it has ruined so many different lives. You know, when I was a Jehovah's Witness going out in service one day, I met a man who told me about all the different child sexual abuse cases that were going on in my organization. And of course I didn't believe him. And he said, why? Why don't you believe me? And I said, well, because I believe we're God's organization and the world hates us. And it would be all over the media if this was a problem, because they'd be more than happy to make us look bad. But because I've never heard of this before, then it certainly wasn't a problem. Well, interestingly enough, it is all over the media now, and it was a problem. It's just that the policies within JW.org did such a great job of hiding this abuse and hiding the abusers. And this has been going on for decades. And the policies within this organization make it worse than most organizations. At least that's my opinion. But I'm going to present to you various clips from many different documentaries that have been done around the world. For example, Australia, there's one from Australia, Canada, the United States, and the UK. Oh, and the Netherlands, that you're going to get to see for yourself whether or not you feel that this organization has dealt with this properly. Now, I know that pedophiles have infiltrated every organization, and people are going to say that, you know, this is a worldwide problem, it's not just JW.org. Yes, I agree with that. What I'm trying to say is that it's the policies within this organization that has made it worse. I mean, for example, the Catholic Church did some horrible things, as we all know. It wasn't the fact that there were pedophiles there that bothered me. It was the fact that they covered it up. It's the fact that they allowed it to continue, even though they knew this was going on. All they did was shuffle the pedophiles around. Well, not exactly this kind of thing, but things similar to that have gone on with JW.org. But personally, I think it's even worse what has gone on. And I want to show you why I feel that's the case. Elders who speak out against this are the minority. Because I know some people watching this may say, well, I had an elder who was great, and I'm not trying to put down the elders. I know there are some amazing elders who have really tried. But the problem is that the policies within this organization stifle the elders and make it very difficult for them. We know that this was the case because in Ireland last year, there were some elders who did try to do the right thing and help a victim of abuse. And look what happened to them. And if you don't know, I'm going to put a link and you can see for yourself. And it also happened with my own father, who was an elder. There was a case of spousal abuse going on within my congregation, and my father tried to intervene, and he tried to help the victim. And he really tried. He did his best to help. And the elder body told him to stay out of it. It was none of his business, that he had no right to do anything about this. And it almost came to physical blows between my father and the elder body, who were physically there trying to stop my father from helping. My father just got so fed up with the hard-heartedness of the elders that he ended up stepping down. He never spoke out. I mean, maybe they pushed him out. I don't know. He never would speak out against the organization, unlike me, his daughter. But anyways, so again, it's the policies. And I want to show you that elders who try to do things don't really even have a chance to even think anymore. They just do. Right or wrong, just go along. That seems to be what the elders do.
Did you take any notes?
No, I didn't.
Can you help us?
I may have done at the time, I'm sorry, but...
you may have done?
I may have, but...
Where are they now?
They would have been destroyed.
Why?
We don't like to have any notes outside of what's kept on file in the congregation.
Why don't you like to have notes of a serious allegation?
Well, we don't want our wives knowing what our stuff what sort of things we're dealing with. We don't want other people in the congregation coming across that information.
And why is it that you want to limit the people who will have access to the information?
Just to protect them, I guess. We don't...
Protect who?
Protect the person that's involved in it and the rest of the congregation, so that they don't have to know these... I don't know, it's just the protocol that we've had, and so we'll just follow that information.
And would you do the same thing today if someone came and reported to you a serious allegation of sexual assault? Would you destroy any notes?
Yes, that's our practice.
We can see how important it is to them that you call the legal department first by all the different times I highlighted it in this letter to all the elders. Not once, though, do they say that they will call the authorities or encourage the victims to do so.
She had to do something, but had nowhere to turn, nowhere except the Kingdom Hall. She asked to see a church elder.
I told him everything that had happened and what my dad had done to me, and he said that he didn't believe me at all, and he said that I was a liar and that my dad would never do such a thing, and that my dad was such a nice man.
Like her sister, she was sent home. Her father, the nice man, was free to continue abusing her. So she gave the elders an ultimatum. Either they did something, or she'd go to the police. They did nothing.
I have told the police about my dad because I am concerned that he has contact with other young girls through the church.
My father was an elder in the Christian congregation, and I pioneered through my teenage years and my young adult life. I am doing an audio video today to tell you about sexual abuse I received from my father and physical abuse while he was an elder. But what prompted me to do this video was because I reached out to the Christian congregation, Bethel, the Watchtower Society, and all I got was a runaround and nobody did anything.
Paul Berry, her husband, beat them. She suspected worse, that Heather was being sexually abused, and went to the elders.
I could tell from their looks on their faces that I'd done a bad thing. That I had spoken against my husband, which is a bad thing. And so their solution was that I should be a better wife and I should pray more. That was their solution. That's how I could stop him from battering us.
Time and again, the girls were told to wait outside while their mother begged local elders for help. Time and again, they saw her sent home to pray harder and be a better wife. Her mother saw the elders more than a dozen times, but remarkably, it never struck Sarah Poisson to look for help outside the church.
You can say that your children's lives are in danger, and in the same breath that you couldn't possibly go to the police. How can that be?
It would never have occurred to me. And even if it had, I would not have done it. Because he's a man. He's a baptized male, and he's a ministerial servant. And I was a woman, and they're kids. And that's even worse than being a woman. These things need to stay in this room. I heard that many, many times. You need to pray about it more. I can show you my Bible. It's paper thin. I still have it. It's all worn out. Did a lot of praying.
After you were told them that her father was sexually abusing Heather, nothing changed?
No. Well, yeah, things changed. They got a lot worse for me.
For years, he said nothing, afraid the elders wouldn't believe him. When he finally did speak out, his instinct as a 9-year-old proved right.
It's not so much did they believe me, did they want to believe me, They didn't want to believe me. I think they turned up at my house, They weren't open-minded, and I think they'd already made their mind up even before they got to my house,
An elder confronted the victim's father, calling the man's son a liar. The father complained to the police, who warned the elder to stay away from the victims' families. His excuse was that as an elder, he had every right to investigate the case for himself.
It was his duty to test the evidence prior to the court case. I advised him that if that sort of behaviour continued, then if an allegation had been formally made, then I would have to investigate that particular person for offences of pervert the course of justice and in fact witness intimidation. The conversation did get a little bit heated towards the end, but obviously I had a duty to protect my complainants and witnesses to the case. I made sure and sent out the signal that I was prepared to protect them and take drastic steps, i.e. arresting people, if they breach that.
And we can see here from their own literature, this is a February 15th, 2012 Watchtower, that this is exactly what goes on, and it's what the organization wants you to do. They blame the victim. They want you to just put up with it. Just be quiet and put up with it. It's your fault. Do whatever you can to make it better, but it's all on you. And as it brings out in this example, this lady named Selma, it brings out that this went on for 17 years she put up with domestic violence. What's basically been happening within the organization is that somebody is victimized, they go to the elders, and then the elders are told immediately to call the legal department for advice. Then the elders will meet with the victim who claims that they've been abused, and instead of helping them, instead of offering them counseling, instead of calling the authorities and finding actual evidence to nab this guy to really prove the case, they tend to blame the victim. Sometimes they accuse the person of lying. Nothing really is done. And then what happens is they send the person back to their abuser. They then will meet with the accused person, and all that person has to do is say, no, I didn't do it. And that's the end of it. Can you imagine what it's like then for the victim, especially if the person is their father, if the abuser is their father, what it would be like after this happens? Nothing gets done. The authorities aren't called. They're not protected in any way. The elders will watch out for you. You know? And what's it going to be like living with your abusive father now that he's been ratted out?
Just over a year ago, Bill Bowen rang the legal desk in New York, asking how he should handle an allegation of abuse in his congregation. The advice he was given has little to do with protecting the victim. He was told to go back to the man accused.
You just ask him again, now, is there anything to this? If he says no, then I would walk away from it. Yeah. Leave it for Jehovah. He'll bring it out. Yeah. But don't get yourself in a jam.
Other times, the victim is put on trial and made to go to a judicial committee. Perhaps the elders felt that they didn't scream loud enough while they were being raped. And during these judicial committees, sometimes extremely inappropriate sexual questions are asked. The whole thing just further traumatizes the victims. It just underscores the whole thing that elders are not professionally trained whatsoever to deal with these types of matters. They don't have any psychological training. They have no counseling training. All they have is their Bible. And all that has happened is that some of these victims have gone on to either commit suicide afterwards or attempted suicide. They've been horribly mistreated. Instead of getting loved and counseled and looked after, they were made to feel guilty and scrutinized.
Her abuser is not a Jehovah's Witness, so the elders have no power over him. But they do have power over Marie-Claude. At 14, she's summoned to explain herself in front of a judicial committee.
Mais je sais pas pourquoi. Je m'attendais à recevoir du réconfort, puis de l'aide, et puis...
That's not what happened?
Non, c'est pas tout à fait ça qui est arrivé. Ce qu'ils m'ont expliqué, c'est que j'aurais dû me débattre jusqu'à la mort. Parce que les contacts sexuels avant le mariage sont interdits. Les témoins m'ont accusé de ne pas être assez traumatisée de mes agressions. Donc, sous-entendait que j'étais encore plus pécheresse, là.
Marie-Claude is all alone in a small room, without her mother. That's because the Jehovah's Witnesses forbid women from attending judicial committees. Waiting to hear Marie-Claude's story, 3 men in their 40s.
Et là, eux me disent, ouais, mais là, si tu veux le pardon de Jéhovah, là, faut que tu nous dises tout. faut que tu nous dises tout. Moi, j'ai 14 ans, là. Je suis face à des hommes. Je suis pas à l'aise de parler de ça. Puis moi, dans ma tête, là, des attouchements. Je trouve que c'est assez... je trouve ça assez clair. Tu sais? Non, eux veulent savoir quoi, comment, quand, combien de fois, puis, tu sais... Et là, moi, je pleure, puis je me débat devant ça, parce que là, je suis bien trop mal à l'aise, là. Il me semble qu'il y avait du plaisir à me demander ces questions-là. Il me semble qu'il y avait du plaisir à m'entendre répondre.
The three elders end up praying with her and absolving her of sin. She's finally about to leave the Kingdom Hall when...
Il barre la porte de la salle du royaume. Les deux autres anciens sont là. Lui est là. Puis là, il me regarde et il dit une dernière question. Oui. Il me dit, juste par curiosité, est-ce que tu as aimé ça? Oh, mon Dieu! Ah, ça a été tellement traumatisant de me faire demander ça. Ça a été tellement humiliant. Moi, dans ma tête, ça l'a confirmé. OK, c'est un voyeur. OK, c'est un voyeur.
A humiliating question, no doubt, but for the Jehovah's Witnesses, it seems essential. A version of that same question can be found in the form the elders had to complete. It's called the Child Abuse Telememo. Question 9. How many elders felt that the victim was somewhat at fault or willingly participated in the act?
I never felt as though any of the elders believed me. In fact, they seemed incensed by what I was saying and took the allegations personally. They asked me questions like, did you enjoy it? And how did you react to that? At times, it felt as though they were getting off on what I was telling them.
The father's abuse compounded by the callous indifference of church leaders when it was brought to their attention.
I tried to take my own life a few weeks later because I couldn't cope with it.
So you tried to commit suicide. As a result of that, did you get any help at all from them?
I got a counselling session from them saying that it was due to me not forgiving my father, that's why I wasn't coping.
Then, 6 years ago, Simon approached the church elders again.
And I said to the elders there that I was really struggling with what happened to me and that I needed some help. I wasn't coping.
What did they say to you?
They said to me back then, they said, and these are the exact words, they said, obviously, for this problem to be bothering you for so long, you're not praying enough.
You're kidding.
And that's exactly what was said to me. So I shut up again for another year or two.
And then?
And then I decided that I was going to go to the police.
Robert Souter was sent to jail for a minimum of 3 years by Judge John Goldring, who had this to say about the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society.
The church authorities took it upon themselves to act as if they were the civil authorities, which they had no right to do. This matter was not reported to the police, as it should have been, and I'm surprised that the police have not taken any action against the church authorities. I hope they will do so. The state has the responsibility of protecting young people, and all citizens have a serious moral responsibility to assist it in doing so. I cannot criticize the church sufficiently seriously for not having reported this matter.
There has to be a confession or 2 witnesses. So we will never change our scriptural position on that subject.
Dus een vrouw komt en meldt bij de ouderlingen, ik ben verkracht. Als alleen zij het zegt en niemand anders, is het geen zonde of overtreding. Laat staan een misdrijf. Een kind komt en is verkracht, het is geen zonde of strafbaar feit, niets.
Excuseer, maar dat is krankzinnig. Als een slachtoffer bij de officier van justitie komt, die we er net ook even aan het woord hebben gezien, die neemt dat bloed serieus en die gaat dan op onderzoek uit. En die gaat dan al het bewijs erbij zoeken, want het hoeft niet alleen in verklaringen te liggen. En hier zie je dus dat het beleid actief ziet op het toedekken van deze misstanden. En daarmee kom je vervolgens bij het grote probleem wat de stichting ziet. En dat is dat je vervolgens eigenlijk een situatie creëert waarbij een voedingsbodem creëert, waarbij mensen dus veilig, eigenlijk zonder dat justitie ingrijpt, zich aan kinderen kunnen vergrijpen. En dat is een situatie waarvan dus de stichting zegt dat moet afgelopen zijn. En vandaar ook dat er dus aangifte gedaan gaat worden, maar ook het Openbaar Ministerie gevraagd gaat worden om ook te bezien, te onderzoeken, een feitenonderzoek naar in te stellen. In hoeverre is nou niet deze organisatie, deze geloofsgemeenschap zelf ook niet strafrechtelijk verantwoordelijk?
The boy was Simon Brady. He was just 9 when he was abused by a member of this Kingdom Hall. He felt he could tell no one.
We're taught if you go to elders, if you want to be believed or you have a complaint about someone, then there has to be more than one of you. There has to be 2 people. There has to be more than one witness, basically. You know, what can I say? They want more than one witness, you know.
And I was also told to leave it to Jehovah, because Jehovah will work it out. But why can't we expose these things that are happening and then leave it to Jehovah?
Sexual abuse of children is not to be tolerated. And I don't care what their reasoning was. It was faulted reasoning. They were wrong, and as far as I'm concerned, they were criminally negligent. That's my take on it.
Even with just the child's word, with one witness, with just the mother's word, without the 2 witnesses their Bible tells them they need.
Well, unfortunately, most kids don't have several witnesses observing them get raped. It's an unfortunate part of it.
Kathleen Hallisey is a London-based lawyer who won the first ever judgment against the Jehovah's Witnesses in the UK for historic sexual abuse.
Do you believe that the Jehovah's Witnesses have a policy that purposefully protects pedophiles and puts children at risk?
I do. I would describe it as a scandal and a global cover-up and a protection of abusers.
At the risk of children?
Absolutely. If you have a policy that requires there to be a second witness to child abuse, it means that virtually every allegation of child abuse is going to go no further. And that puts the child at risk, it puts other children at risk, and it protects the person who's the abuser.
So how many organizations do you know that have a 2-witness rule like this? JW.org insists that it's needed for allegations of child sexual abuse. Yet Jesus clearly wasn't talking about that when he quoted it. He's talking about non-sexual business transactions. There is a perfectly good scripture that's found in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verses 25 and 26 that could be used, because here is an example where a woman was being raped and there was no second witness, and the person who did it to her was to be put to death. You're looking at the July 2018 Awake magazine here. It's just so weird that the organization doesn't apply their 2-witness rule to couples who appear to have fornicated. As you'll see what it says here, it's talking about an unmarried couple spending the night together. And it says that a judicial committee would be formed on the basis of strong circumstantial evidence of sexual immorality. So why is it they can't use strong circumstantial evidence when it comes to a child who's been sexually abused? Why is it they insist on having a second witness when they're not insisting on a second witness in this particular incident?
Bill Bowen, a lifelong member, has resigned as an elder. He says the men at the top are protecting the church, not the children.
They do not want people to know that they have this problem. And by covering it up, they just hurt one person. By letting it out, then they hurt the image of the church.
Elders must report abuse to the church's legal desk. Only if the law demands it must they contact the police. If it doesn't, they may be told they have a moral duty to call them, but often it seems to stop here. It seems to go no further than the church's own secret database.
Every detail is written down about what happened, where it happened, when it happened, how it happened.
So you're saying the organisation has its own sexual offenders register, if you like?
That's exactly right.
That it's keeping to itself and not showing others?
Exactly right. These men remain anonymous to anyone outside the organization, and anyone really inside the organization unless you are personally reporting the matter.
There were 3 elders, including him, in that committee. And they apparently, so Morris told me, spoke to Bethel and Sydney and decided amongst themselves that no one should know about it. It should be a private reproof.
So, for sexually abusing his daughter from the age of 4, a crime he readily admitted, all Victor Webb got was a reprimand behind closed doors.
A private reproof?
Private, yep. So, and then he would be put on a course of Bible studies, because that's what was wrong with him. Spiritually, he was sick, so he was told.
Why didn't the elders of the church disfellowship him for what he did?
Why didn't they?
Yeah. Why didn't you?
Well, I'm not the decision maker.
You were?
No, I was only one of them. I was a committee.
Can you tell me why he wasn't disfellowshipped?
Well, not now, I can't.
Did you go to the police?
Which is a reasonable... No, I didn't.
Why not?
Well, it was something for the family to decide and do.
Morris said to me that the authorities shouldn't be notified because it would be a bad witness and that they would be able to handle the situation.
So Morris Hadley told you quite specifically not to go to the police?
Yes.
Yeah, and I say that that's not true.
You swear by that?
I swear by that, categorically.
You never said that to her?
Never said that to her.
Yet here's something that lends weight to Natalie's claim. A letter from her mother to Morris Hadley and the other elders in 1997.
Your inability and reluctance to deal with the police shows we would have been waiting forever.
By now, the family had had enough and had gone to the police themselves.
I just want to add that even when they have been mandated to report, they still didn't always report. There's many cases where this happened. They preferred to keep it hidden, but by keeping it all hidden, they've allowed thousands of more children to be abused.
Anderson was a researcher at the Watchtower Society in the early 1990s, when a senior official there asked her to look into the church's handling of sexual abuse cases. What she found, she says, sickened her. Hundreds of molestation cases on record, all kept secret in church files. Secret not only from the outside world, but from the members themselves, the families, the mothers, fathers, and children who trust the church is looking out for them.
The latest name added to the list should be that of James Barrett. 3 days ago, clutching his Bible, this elder from Rugby was convicted of indecently assaulting 2 boys and sentenced to 2 years in prison. The church was told of the allegations 5 years ago, but Barrett denied them and was allowed to remain an elder. Only during the police investigation did the whole story become clear to Alison Cousins. Only now did she discover her sister had been abused too. Only now did she find out that her father confessed to elders 3 years earlier. Yet no one had warned her, his next victim.
Nobody told me anything. They all basically kept it all under wraps and told nobody what had happened.
What they did was keep a record of her father's name and confession on a church database, a register of suspected and convicted paedophiles to be monitored. We asked Alison Cousins to obtain a copy of her records using the Data Protection Act. There, in black and white, was proof that the Jehovah's Witnesses had known for 3 years that her father was a self-confessed paedophile. Yet far from monitoring him, the elders twice turned a blind eye to his abuse of his daughters. When he confessed to church elders, Cousins got a mild rebuke. When he confessed in court, he got 5 years in jail.
What no one in Conti's family knew was that Jonathan Kendrick had admitted to molesting another child a year earlier.
Regarding possible sexual abuse.
Michael Clark, an elder in the congregation, was asked about it in this deposition.
Do you recall becoming aware of a report of sexual abuse of a child by Jonathan Kendrick?
Yes.
When did you first become aware of such a report?
He had called us to his home to discuss or to confess to an incident with his stepdaughter.
Clark never called the police. He followed Watchtower protocol. He wrote to New York headquarters asking how to deal with Kendrick's confession. They told him not to investigate the matter further. Instead, they said, provide him with strong scriptural counsel to avoid a repetition of such a serious offense.
We don't make that public to the congregation. That's confidential.
The elders did not warn other members that one of their own was a child abuser.
And that's the policy and the practice of Jehovah's Witnesses that you learned as an elder, correct?
Yes.
Clark says the elders told Kendrick not to be alone with children, but he was still allowed to join in congregation activities that included minors. A year later, one of those minors was Candace Conti.
And there are other cover-ups in the church that have had even more serious consequences, allowing pedophiles to offend again and again. What happened to Simon Thomas is, by any measure, a shocking indictment of the Jehovah's Witnesses and their willful disregard of the secular law.
Do you feel any moral responsibility for the fact that he continued to abuse other children?
I think you have a moral responsibility to respect my wishes and follow the procedure I've given you, and that is to contact the Watchtower Society of Australia. Don't harass me.
Every child in this photograph with Simon Thomas was abused by Robert Souter. As we now know, the total number Souter molested could be as high as 40.
I think all of them could have been saved. But I could have been saved myself, because I found out that one of the sisters in the congregation had spoken to an elder and said that she'd seen Robert Souter doing something to her son. And this was before Robert Souter abused me.
All those stories are heartbreaking, but the last one has haunted me for years. I remember watching it years ago on a program. And it's just so hard to believe that 40 more kids were abused. And it could have been stopped right at the beginning when a sister went to the elders and told her about this brother having what she saw. And the elders did nothing, and 40 more kids were abused. It's absolutely disgraceful.
The elders told me that I had to tell my mother about my abuse. When I told her that my father had abused me, she asked, "Really? What did he do?" I didn't want to tell my mother any detail. So I said to her, "He's been rude to me." She said to me, "He did that to your older sister when she was 2. I was absolutely gutted and upset. I asked my mother, "How could you have left us alone with him, knowing what he had done to my sister?" My mother said to me, "I didn't think he would do it again because he had become a Jehovah's Witness." After Rhonda Roy told me about my father's reinstatement, I said to Ron, "Well, I want to take it to the police because the congregation is not safe and children are at risk." Ron replied to me, "He is now a brother again," and he quoted the scripture that says that we don't take our brothers to court. Ron said to me, "So if you take it to the police, you will bring reproach on Jehovah's name, and you can be disfellowshipped for doing that." I was very upset and disappointed. It seemed that there was to be no justice or acknowledgement for what my father had done to my sisters and me. I felt like we didn't matter, and that the abuse was not considered bad enough in the eyes of Jehovah. Once again, I felt helpless because I feared Jehovah and I feared being disfellowshipped. My life would be worse than it already was.
So I called my elders and I said, "Look, I'm taking it to the police."
What did they say?
"Don't. Or else."
Or else what?
That's what I said. I said, "Or else what?" And he said, just don't. I said, what? I'll be disfellowshipped? If I take it to the police, is that what's going to happen to me? And he said, yes, you will be disfellowshipped. And I was just like, what? You're going to disfellowship me for being raped, yet the guy who raped me is still a Jehovah's Witness? And they said, don't. Don't take it to the police. You will be condemned by God.
Victor Webb pleaded guilty in the Victorian County Court to 8 counts of indecent assault and 7 counts of incest. He was sent to jail for 10 years, but the church elders supported the criminal, not his victim.
They sent 3 representatives from the congregation to be with Dad. Yep, and
During the trial?
During the trial, and no one was sent for me. And in fact, they ignored us. When we walked into the court, they wouldn't even speak to us. I guess they thought I was satanic or heading down that way, yeah.
But the real evildoer is still being supported behind bars.
You go and see him in jail?
I visit him periodically.
So you go and see him in prison?
Twice a year.
And why do you do that?
Why do I do it? Well, don't you believe that people can change?
Even now, Victor Webb hasn't been disfellowshipped, though the private reproof became a public reproof when the police became involved.
Yes, before all onlookers, other members of the congregation were advised of his situation so that parents could, if they chose to, take precautionary steps to avoid situations that might compromise their children.
And that was it.
In Birmingham, as in New Hampshire, the elders supported the accused. Even after Patty was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in jail, they didn't waver. At the next meeting in the Kingdom Hall, the elders made sure the congregation knew where they stood.
There was an announcement given saying as a body of elders, that's including every elder in Rubery, we feel as a body of elders, basically this man is innocent, we believe he's innocent, and the Bethel have informed us they will do everything in their power to help this man.
I then made it my duty to actually speak to the legal services team of the Bethel in London and voice my disquiet about the lack of cooperation I'd had from start to finish from this inquiry.
Under police pressure, the elders did apologise and were demoted, though not sacked.
Erica Garza's accused molester, Manuel Belize, showed up in court with plenty of support.
His side was full of Jehovah's Witnesses. People I thought were my friends, but they were there to support him. And on my side was my family.
Even though Belize had apparently confessed his crimes to church elders, it appeared to make little difference. He was expelled from the church, but only temporarily. Elders allowed him to rejoin the church before the trial. John White, the congregation's top elder, explained at a court hearing.
We're satisfied that he was repentant and could be admitted to the congregation again. To us, we don't see a problem.
Did anybody say we understand the pain that this girl has gone through?
They said they feel sorry for me.
Even without the church's help or the testimony of elders who Erica says knew what had happened, in August of 1998, Manuel Belize was convicted, guilty on 2 counts of rape and 2 counts of child molestation. He was sentenced to 11.5 years in prison. But 2 years into his term, his conviction was overturned on a technicality over how the jury had been selected. Following an investigation, Manuel Belize was charged with molestation and rape. And the church? Erica says her California Kingdom Hall not only shunned her, but shunned her family as well.
What happened?
Was removed as an elder.
So they kicked you out?
Yes, they did.
Did any of those elders, any of the people in the church, stand up and speak on your behalf?
No.
Last summer, nearly 5 years after she first came forward, Erica headed back to court. Once again, not one Jehovah's Witness from her former church came to support her. But this time, she wasn't alone.
Comments we've made from all over the country.
That outspoken elder from Kentucky, Bill Bowen, was there.
Various notes to you and things.
And Bowen had set up a new support group for sexually abused Jehovah's Witnesses. And more than 20 people who had heard about the case through his website were there to support Erica.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. These are people who don't know me,
I'm dead.
who flew from all over the place for me, to be there for me, because they realize, hey, you didn't do anything wrong. And it was so encouraging to see people there for me, as opposed for him.
In court, Manuel Belize took the stand. He denied molesting Erica, but did admit touching her inappropriately. Once again, Belize was found guilty.
Guilty, 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 guilty.
Erica Garza says she has found justice in spite of her church.
Oh, I can't believe it. On all 4 counts.
Justice, a little bit of justice. You deserve it.
Thank you, God. Thank you, Lord.
Her molester has been sent to prison for 11.5 years.
Thank you for all your help, Bill. You'll sleep well tonight, won't you? Oh, yeah.
All Erica wants now, she says, is for the church to change its policy and give molestation victims simple advice.
Take it to the police. Hey, encourage me to take it to the police. Don't tell me not to.
Though the Jehovah's Witnesses supported her stepfather in court, he was sentenced to a minimum of 56 years in prison, which likely means he'll die behind bars.
But not everyone did believe them. Even after he was convicted by a jury on all 17 indictments, 24 members of the Kingdom Hall turned up at the sentencing hearing. They all appeared to give character statements for Paul Berry.
He had already been found guilty, and they found room in their hearts to stand in front of that child and say, we don't believe any of it. And what they were saying was they didn't believe the child, they didn't believe in the system of justice, they didn't believe the judge, they didn't believe the jury, they didn't believe anyone except themselves.
Everything they were saying was he's such a fine worker. I've worked with him secularly, and, you know, he always shows up to work on time, and he's such a good worker. Everybody said that, and also the second half was everybody started saying, he's babysat our kids hundreds of times. I would let him babysit our kids every day, and he's such a good worker. And I was just sitting there like, he's not on trial for being a negligent worker.
I can't imagine how badly she must have felt not to have been believed by elders in her own close-knit community. What a horrible blow to a child this must have been. Shame. Shame on them.
In the years since, Holly and her family became symbols of rebellion for those who've remained in the Jehovah's Witness faith. For many, that's not a good thing.
Some of the people who'd stayed in the truth, as they call it, had told me that they passed around pictures of my mother and my sister and me at almost all the congregations in the District of New England, warning people that we had been seduced by the devil.
Over 20,000 names on a secret database. They're the first of those survivors to take their fight to court. They're claiming that not only did the church do nothing when they were abused, it ostracized and punished the family when they called the police.
I just want to say that as horrific as it is to see entire congregations supporting the abuser, I've seen this exact same thing happen. It happened in my own congregation. You got to understand that the abuser is a liar. He's a liar and he's a phony. And he shows up at the Kingdom Hall, you know, all dressed up with his suit and his tie. And perhaps he's an elder or perhaps he's a ministerial servant. And he's probably a very nice person at the Kingdom Hall. But who knows that behind closed doors, this doofus is complete pervert and complete sicko and brutalizing his family. But at the Kingdom Hall, he's all dressed up fancy. And he's got his daughter there, or son, whatever the case may be, but we'll use the case of a daughter because that's what it was in my case as well, who's got piercings and earrings. And of course, we know that the Jehovah's Witness organization is very quick to judge people. You know, if you have piercings and earrings and things like that and tattoos, of course it means you're a bad person, right? So the daughter wants nothing to do with the organization because, or her father. The father says she's rebelling. She wants nothing to do with the organization because she's called out for help to elders and various ones, and nobody has helped her. So of course she wants nothing to do with them. And all you see is a daughter who's rebelling and a father who's dressed up all nice. Appearances can be very deceiving. And so I can understand how this can happen. And once the congregation gets the idea that the daughter has made a claim that her father's abusing her, and all you see is a nice man, you think, what kind of a person would say such a horrible thing about her father? She's a bad daughter, you know? scriptures are quoted about people in the Old Testament and how they were disrespectful to their parents and so forth. And it's very quick and easy to see how this can happen. But I do just want to say that Holly, the girl with the tattoos that you were watching in the videos, she's a remarkable person, a very brave person. She's completely turned her life around. And the W5 episode, I actually did a follow-up to her story. It was done 10 years after the original story was done. And I'll put a link up. I think it's worth watching. It's very, very uplifting to see how she's turned her life around.
Are you familiar with BCG's case?
I'm sorry, I'm not, no. I haven't lived in Australia for 36 years, and I haven't certainly had a chance to look through the files.
Well, BCG was one of the witness statements and gave evidence at this commission. You haven't had the opportunity to read her evidence or to look at her statement?
I haven't, I'm sorry.
And how people like BCG, who have had nothing but just really very traumatic experiences, feel very concerned when they feel that their voices are not being listened to at all by the senior members of your organisation.
I'd be very disappointed if that's the case, and certainly I would hate for that impression to be given to the person you're representing.
How do Jehovah's Witness leaders respond to complaints that they're trying to bury cases like Erica's? They declined our request for an on-camera interview, but spoke to us off-camera and provided us with a videotaped policy statement by spokesman J.R. Brown. What remains unanswered, though, is why the church gets involved at all with investigating what are criminal matters. And just how often do they turn one of their own into authorities? We asked the church for some examples, proof that they're as tough as they say they are on members who abuse children. The church waited 6 months, but finally offered us 2 cases. And right away, we noticed something. In both cases, the victims were Jehovah's Witnesses, but their alleged molesters were not.
The elders have stepped down and refused to talk to us. So we asked the man sent here to sort things out.
Hello, Mr. Briggs. We're from BBC Panorama, as you know.
I know that.
We just want to ask you a few questions about the in-cousins case.
It's reasonable to really actually consider the brothers and sisters in the congregation that have had to undergo all this pressure. And so I would just leave it at that. That's all I have to say on the matter.
The database, Mr. Briggs. Why should the Jehovah's Witnesses keep a database of men who have confessed to being paedophiles, but the police aren't told? Do you think that's reasonable behaviour, Mr. Briggs?
We contacted the Jehovah's Witnesses Canadian headquarters outside of Toronto. They refused to answer our questions. Instead, they directed us to their website.
The London headquarters, the Bethel, refused to discuss any specific case. They said this was because the elders had to respect the confidentiality of the victims. But the victims wanted answers. We again asked for an interview with their spokesman, Paul Gillies. When he refused, we phoned him, told him we were recording, and asked a simple question. Are elders told to report allegations of abuse to the police or not?
The elders' guideline is, if you get any single allegation of child abuse come to your attention, phone this office.
Why phone this office? Why not phone your local police station?
Well, you see, the first thing is we have to make sure for the protection of the child.
Is it the protection of the child, or is it fair to ask you, isn't it the protection of the church that comes straight to mind there?
It is the protection of the child. We have a child protection policy.
It was a long conversation. We asked if he'd be prepared to answer the same questions on camera. He refused.
We asked the Watchtower Society a series of questions about its handling of the cases of Robert Souter and Victor Webb, and asked them to tell us how many child abusers they've uncovered in their ranks. We were told it wasn't the business of the media to know, though the church did say very few were elders or those holding positions of responsibility. In this letter, Viv Maritz, the Society's Australian president, declined our request for an interview and said about the claims of Simon Thomas and Natalie Webb, "My inquiries indicate that the elders involved did not give instructions not to report the abuse to the police. It's at odds with everything we've heard from a number of sources, including a judge. But on previous form, the congregation will be told our story is the work of Satan."
The media out there, with all its power and its might, it presents human nature in 3Ds. 3Ds. Debauchery of every kind, deception of every kind, and demonism of every kind. And we need to be aware of that.
Leave it for Jehovah. That, according to thousands of victims, is the Jehovah's Witness child protection policy laid bare.
But the authorities and the courts need to be aware of something else, something far more sinister, the Church's notion of the truth. In this book, Insight on the Scriptures, it says here, doesn't it, lying generally involves saying something false to a person who is entitled to know the truth. Yes. Would your average judge or magistrate be somebody who is entitled to know the truth?
It would be very difficult for a person not to uphold what the society would want. They would back the society, and they would see that as backing Jehovah, in which case these people, the court, is not entitled to know the truth.
Is not?
No. And in that case they would say, that's not a lie.
So it's quite possible, given this definition of lying, that a Jehovah's Witness could go before a civil court in this country and lie to their back teeth.
Yes.
And this from the man who was once the Society's own lawyer.
That has always been, as long as I remember, has been Watchtower doctrine, that only those who are entitled to know the truth deserve the truth.
Right, but if they determine that a particular judge or a particular court is not entitled to know the truth, they won't tell the truth.
Correct.
The victims were only able to stop the abuse by turning to Satan's world for help. J.W. Org callously turned a blind eye, not unlike what the Pharisees also would have done. J.W. Org claims to follow the scriptures, like this one cited here in the Bible book of James. So you're looking at the publication Commentary on Letter of James. This is a book published by the Watchtower Society. I think it was around 1979 or so. The verses there are James 2, verses 15 and 16. It says, "If a brother or a sister is in a naked state and lacking the food sufficient for the day, yet a certain one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but you do not give them the necessities for their body, of what benefit is it?" The book goes on to talk there about, people who are just wishing kind words, and they have it within their ability to actually help the person, but they don't do it. It says they're actually a mockery and may aggravate the pain of the suffering one. They call it a so-called faith, and it is useless. And if you look on page 79 there, it talks about ones who do this are having no love or kindness. Likewise, the professing Christian with such an empty faith would reveal the worthlessness of his religion, bringing reproach on God. Could this be called Christianity? Would he be following the example of Christ?
In the end, the decision was taken out of her hands. In school, bruises were noticed on her children. Social workers were told. They gave her a stark choice: leave your husband, or we take your children. But if she left him, she knew the church would cut her dead.
At that point, I had to make a decision between God and my kids. And I knew, well, at that time I knew, that if I chose my kids, I didn't have a prayer. But I didn't care anymore. So we lost everything in one day.
Sarah Poisson had no life outside the Kingdom Hall. When the congregation cast her out, she had no choice but to move away. She didn't just lose every friend she had. Overnight, she was homeless, penniless, scraping a living to bring up her children. The friends they'd had openly shunned them. But with the family now free of the church, Holly could finally tell her mother the truth. Her stepfather had abused her too. When he tried to gain access to her younger sister, Holly finally did what the elders hadn't. She walked into the local police station. She told the police exactly what Berry had wanted, of the brutal sexual assault she'd suffered throughout her childhood.
I had no vision of me growing up and being 16. I thought he was eventually going to kill me, and then I'd be free, and that's the way I looked at it.
Police accompanied then 16-year-old Holly back to the house in New Hampshire to document what happened. Paul Berry was arrested for what he had done here.
Thank you. I was really little. You were really little, I know.
It took nearly 4 years for the case to come to court. Paul Berry faced 17 charges of aggravated sexual assault.
And it was so powerful to be believed.
Because I'd never had any dealings with the police, I was very apprehensive, but they were just the most compassionate, wonderful lot of people, and I was so surprised. I got more caring and concern from them than I did from any elder. Genuine caring.
The trials were easy compared to what I had been through with the elders during the committee meetings. I would go through it 20 more times if I had to. At least the court has rules when questioning survivor witnesses. The Jehovah's Witnesses can do and insinuate whatever they want, and there are no protections for the victims at all.
Ted Jarretts is one of the men responsible for the church's child protection policy. For more than 2 months, we've been asking them for an interview. We want answers to some simple questions. Why do they keep their database of suspected paedophiles secret? Why don't they report all allegations of abuse to the police? Why do they send children back to the arms of their abusers? They refused to talk to us, but here at last, we had our chance.
Tell me about the database. How do you justify keeping a list of people, men in some cases, who have confessed to paedophilia, but you have not reported them to the authority? What justification is there for you to keep that list?
You have a privacy law. You have a directive from the European Union. You observe that, don't you?
So when allegations of abuse are made, it's all right to keep them private?
I think you were answered. That question was answered should be to your satisfaction.
Can you answer it now?
I'm not going to repeat. I'll just tell you exactly that you can go and you see it in writing. It's all in print. You know, the Bible says, do not go beyond the things that are written. We don't go beyond the things that are written.
And that was that.
Let's move this way, please.
No doubt, no second thoughts. Just a simple belief that Jehovah will sort it out. A belief for which others, younger and more vulnerable, may continue to pay a price. But another serious accusation is levelled against Jehovah's Witnesses. In their efforts to cover up abuse, they may even try to frustrate police investigations. In Birmingham, West Midlands police were told of a sexual assault by a Jehovah's Witness on a young boy. They asked local elders for help.
They were very reluctant to give up any information towards me. It was an uphill battle so far as the church was concerned with me virtually at every turn. They actually said to me, unless I could provide 2 Jehovah's Witnesses who had actually seen the offence, then as far as they were concerned, the offence hadn't taken place.
Now, what that family wants to know is why he was reinstated into the church around 6 months later.
Bring the Watchtower Society of Australia and they will answer all your questions regarding that situation.
Well, can you tell me, sir, why can't you speak about it?
Because I'm not at liberty to.
Why?
Because I'm not.
You handled the case.
That's none of your business.
I spoke to an elder down there and he said Robert Suter was repentant, so when you're repentant, you're allowed back into the congregation.
Do you have a problem with hearing? You have a hearing impediment? I just
I'm trying to find some answers.
You're not going to get answers off me.
Some of these people gave good statements and very, very positive in their attitude and support of Alison and her sister. Other people felt that they didn't want to be involved and gave the negative statement, and some people refused to speak to us altogether.
Why?
I have no idea why. They just refused to speak to the police.
Were they Jehovah's Witnesses?
I believe they were.
But they wouldn't help?
They wouldn't give a statement to us, no. I believe they were the last to know. They had told several people before coming to the police, and these people had not reported it either to the police or the social services. We have a duty to protect, and if we're not told, we're unable to protect.
In your decision on whether or not to disfellowship someone, you don't take consideration of children outside of the congregation.
Do take consideration of them, but what ability have we got to protect every child in Australia?
Well, what you can do is you can report to the child protection authorities.
And that is done in some cases.
But generally it's not done, is it?
No.
It's not done unless there's a legal requirement for it to be done, is there?
That is true.
They're living in denial. Denial of what's happening to their children. And it's not a matter, you see, if they accept that, then they accept that there is a problem. So rather than admit that there's a problem, they will just let children go on and continue to be molested and not do anything about it.
Manuel Belize was released from prison to await a new trial. Last summer, Dateline found him back at the Kingdom Hall, about to join others going door to door, evangelizing for the church.
It just makes me so sad because I was raped and I'm being shunned and he raped me and he's being loved. It gives me chills up my spine just to think about it.
So where is this convicted child molester today? A man who, according to court records, has admitted molesting girls all his life. Dateline found him going door to door, a Jehovah's Witness in good standing, evangelizing to people who know nothing about his record. His own son, Carl, says the church should know better.
He's a sexual predator. When he goes door to door, he has a craving for young juvenile girls, as he puts it. He's looking at that child, having those immoral thoughts in his mind while he's there.
You're Wayman Ivory?
Yeah, and who are you?
You're a convicted, violent child rapist, and you're out here in the neighborhood?
No.
1992 or so? A 9-year-old girl?
No, you got it all wrong. You got it all wrong.
Did you get convicted? Are you on the pedophile registry list?
No, not.
Violent offender?
No, you got it all wrong, mister.
Do I need to call 911? Are you supposed to be around children up and down the street here?
What you need to do is go.
No, I think you need to go, and you should not be proselytizing when you're a pedophile or rapist. Child rapist.
The organization has the opportunity right now to make amends and apologize to their victims and compensate them. In fact, at the Australian Royal Commission, they promised that they would do this. They said that they would not wait for the redress scheme to come out in 2018 before they started doing this for their victims. Yet here we are, halfway through the year, and they've done jack squat. While other organizations, like the Catholic Church, has been publicly stating how sorry they are and says that they're more than happy to compensate their victims.
We certainly expect to be paying out for survivors for many years to come, and we stand ready to do that. We're going to back that with our insurance and our assets. We're determined to bring justice and full redress healing, if we can, to the victims of this terrible crime.
Well, this is not really about the law. It's about going further than compassion and actually providing people help for grievous psychological harm. Surely you're not going to wait until 2018 when a redress scheme finally comes up to reach out to victims and survivors.
No, not at all. We have already now been in contact with these, so the ones who've made claims, we're not actively going out looking for other victims because we don't know what the situation is with them. But those who've corresponded to us, who've sought some form of redress or compensation, we're at the point now where we can address it long before 2018.
After 18 months of negotiation, a breakthrough. A national redress scheme for child victims of sexual abuse in some of Australia's biggest institutions is now largely signed up.
I would love to welcome representatives from the Anglican Church, the Scouts, the YMCA and the Salvation Army, who are here to announce that they will be joining the National Redress Scheme.
The government says 80% of children sexually abused in institutions are now covered. Amongst those yet to join are the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Uniting Church and other religious groups. And the pressure is on.
I will encourage all those groups to join the scheme. If they don't, they will be the ones who will have to publicly defend their stance.
Under the scheme, survivors can be paid up to $150,000 in compensation, but that's the maximum, regardless of the amount of abuse suffered or the number of abusers.
Check out these publications and see what the organization had to say about other churches. From the Watchtower, the December 1st of 1994, it says the clergy have also denied God by turning their backs on his moral standards, as evidenced, for example, by a steady stream of lawsuits against pedophile priests. And then here from the Awake of June of 2009, church attendance in many countries has also waned. Others are disillusioned by church scandals, such as those involving pedophile priests. And then we see this other one. It's the April 8th Awake from 1993. It's called Victims of Pedophile Priests Speak Out. What I've got highlighted there. It says, this second abuse occurs when the church refuses to listen to victims of abuse, fails to take their accusations seriously, and moves only to protect the offending priests. It says they portrayed the Catholic Church as belonging to an unhealthy and misguided group more bent on preserving privilege and power than in serving lay needs. The Church knows and has known for a long time a great deal about the sexual activity of its priests. It has looked the other way, tolerated, covered up, and simply lied about the broad spectrum of sexual activity of its priests. Not surprisingly then, many abuse survivors are suing the Church. Survivors go to the courts, it appears, not as a first resort, but as a last resort. Does any of that sound familiar at all? So for years, while they were busy mocking the Catholic Church and other churches for this heinous activity, they themselves were just as guilty, and they knew darn well that it was going on within their organization.
So it's time that governments crack down on this organization.
Oh, definitely. I'd hate to think how many children are being abused now.
Even as we speak.
As we speak.
The organisational procedures need to change because kids cannot suffer like that anymore. It's wrong.
Yes, reforms within JW.org are sorely needed. The Australian Royal Commission was a fantastic investigation because it shone a light on a small scale of what's happening within this organization. We can see from the various video clips that I showed you that this is not a problem just in Australia. It's worldwide. It has affected every country of the world that this organization operates in. And it's their policies that make them worse, I believe, than other organizations. Policies that they really need to change for the protection of children and for justice to be done. So in what ways do I believe this organization is worse than others? Well, let's have a look. They misapply scriptures and employ their two-witness rule so that most abusers can get off. More children are abused and no further action is taken. They will call their legal department to ensure that they are protected, but do not call the authorities to protect victims and potential victims. They have their own judicial system to deal with crimes where victims are on their own against a minimum of 3 elders with no lawyer, no witnesses present, and no recording allowed. No public record is available, so nobody ever knows what really happened, yet the results can be life-changing and devastating for victims. Even those found guilty of abuse even though they're ousted from the congregation, they are still a threat to the community with no jail time, no criminal record, free to work around children, foster them, molest them, etc. Convicted molesters can be reinstated and are believed to have reformed, and most witnesses will be unaware of their past history. Convicted molesters are encouraged to go door to door to unsuspecting householders. The organization employs theocratic warfare with the authorities and seeks to pervert justice when in court. They have yet to apologize to their victims and only compensate them when forced. The all-male elders have no proper training in counseling, psychology, etc., and further traumatize victims with uneducated, perverted questions. Rape is treated as a sin and not as a crime. Members are not warned about the molesters in their midst and are led to believe it is a safe environment. Children who are abused within the organization are given no rehabilitation and not encouraged to seek professional help. Victims are treated as adversaries and have been punished with extreme shunning for calling the police and for warning those within the congregation. So I'm sure I've missed some points, but if you can think of any more, please put them down below in the comments section of this video. You know, I made this video for 2 reasons, really. One is because I want to shame the organization to change their policies. They really need to protect children, and they need to see for themselves. Look at your record. It's an abysmal record. You've left behind how many suicides? I don't know, countless suicides, countless PTSD patients, countless depressions and broken families, and just ruined the lives of so many people that you could have stopped if you had just gone to the authorities. So we want them to change their policies. We want to protect children, and we want to warn people. The organization isn't all smiles and giggles, you know. They do not love their enemies, as Jesus said they needed to. We can see the way the elders respond and the way the organization responds when they're questioned with their abysmal record. They have no comment. They've got nothing to say. They won't even talk to their victims. They won't even read their statements in court, as we saw Jeffrey Jackson. He hadn't even read the statements of the victims. There seems to be no way to reach the upper management of this organization. They couldn't care less. Keep warm and well fed. That seems to be their response. But we know what the Bible says about that. It's completely a mockery of faith and belies all their claims. This idea that they abhor child abuse. This is the blanket statement they always give. We abhor child abuse. Well, that is utter rubbish. We can see that they really don't. They couldn't care less. So what can we do? Well, there's actually a lot that we can do. Because we seem to have now the ear of the media, and governments are becoming more involved, and they're wanting to make some changes as well. So there's lots of things that we can do. I actually joined an organization called SCARS, which stands for Stop Child Abuse, Advocates for Reform and Safety. But let's talk about this another time, because this video is already super long, longer than I would have wanted it to be. But I thought it was important to show all the clips I showed. I believe me, I pulled some out, but because it was getting so long. But I couldn't pull any more out. They're just too important for people to see. So in another video, I will talk about practical ways that we can help enact change and protect children in the world that we live in. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again another time. Bye-bye.